Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. I'm your host, Luis Rodriguez. Thank you for being with us. On today's show, we'll be discussing the following: the poverty crisis here in Las Vegas, if Apple should comply with the FBI, and the Nevada Caucus results. Before we begin, let me introduce our panel. First, we have Elizabeth Kneebone, a Brookings Fellow. Next, we have fellow comedian James Schaeffer, a junior majoring in journalism and media studies. Back with us again is David Serabian, a UNLV graduate in political science. And finally, we have Daniel Brady, a junior majoring in political science. Thank you for being with us.
Of course.
All right, let's begin with our first topic. So let's start our discussion with Elizabeth. She's a Brookings Fellow at the Metropolitan Policy Program, and her work focuses on the urban and suburban poverty, metropolitan demographics, and tax policies that support lower-income individuals. I know that you had a lecture yesterday. Could you please provide the panel and our audience a brief review on of your research?
Sure. My work at Brookings is focused mainly on the shifting geography of poverty and what that means in terms of access to opportunity. Broadly, what was one of the most significant trends we were looking at in the 2000s is the rapid growth of poverty, not just nationally, but for the first time, suburbs in our major metro areas became home to both the fastest growing poor population and the largest. And you can see those same trends playing out here in the Las Vegas region. So last night I really took everyone through what has been happening here in this region. You know, between 2000 and 2014, the poor population in the suburbs here grew by 123%. And it's not that poverty wasn't growing in Las Vegas and Henderson, it doubled over that same time period. It's just that now the fastest pace of growth is happening outside of the urban core, and in fact more poor residents now live in the suburbs than in the cities, in this region and nationally.
Okay, so hearing about this, who do you guys think should take the charge in fixing this? Should this be a state issue, or should the state take the charge in fixing this, or should the federal government? So I'll start with you, Daniel. Who do you think?
It's an interesting question, and it's definitely a topic that's been up for debate recently. I'm more inclined in this instance to prefer a combination of programs, both from a state and a federal level, just namely because I know a lot of states have been having an issue with funding these sort of projects and what they should do. And I feel that the states could also be one of the better ones in implementing some of these projects because they're able to work with the cities more hand in hand than a federal government. So I'd kind of like to see a combination of the two.
What about you, David? Who do you think?
Well, my opinion is that you need to focus on the metropolitan areas themselves. Metropolitan areas, they don't get as much credit as they're due. As Jennifer Vey pointed out one of the times that she was here, is that the top 100 metropolitan areas in the United States provide 75% of the nation's GDP. That's nothing to wave a finger at. So you need to have some focus at the local level, especially the county, specifically Clark County, because they have the vast majority of these citizens inside the county, but you also need some federal guidance on the matter. And funding, of course.
So you kind of hit the nail to my next question. Elizabeth, we talked yesterday, so you were telling me who has really taken the charge in trying to correct this poverty issue?
You know, yeah, absolutely. Almost every major metro area has seen a similar sort of spread in poverty beyond the urban core. Almost every major metro saw the suburban poor population grow, and most now have more poor residents outside the city. And we have seen that the federal government, while it is a really important player in these issues, has been very slow to respond, to catch up to the rapid pace of growth and shifts that we've seen in recent years. Instead, we've seen a lot more leadership coming from the local level where there is more flexibility, more maneuverability. We're not facing the same sort of partisan gridlock that Washington is, or even the state level with strapped budgets, et cetera. Local level actors have really jumped in to try and figure out how to grapple with these challenges and to do so in a more scaled way. That regional angle really is so important in so many reasons, and for so many reasons and so many issues, but particularly when we think about creating more access to opportunity and addressing the growth of poverty and the concentrations of poverty we've seen. Usually, this leadership has come from a lot of different directions. It can be a school district or elected officials at the county or municipal level. Sometimes it's philanthropic funders taking the lead. But really, what we're seeing is that most of the most exciting innovation and sort of efforts to come at these issues in more integrated ways and more collaborative ways, we're really learning from our metropolitan areas what states and federal actors need to do to further support those types of strategies.
Now, the local governments do take the charge, like you said. So when the state governments and the federal government finally take action, do they pretty much clear out all the changes that the local government has done, or do they just keep on following what the locals have done?
Well, the way that we've seen this work in practice so far is you can look at the Chicago region, for instance. This is an area that we've long associated with urban poverty, but in the last decade, actually now, there are more poor residents living in the suburbs. They saw almost doubling of the poor population. They were really ahead of the curve on the trend and also in thinking about how to adapt to it. And in a lot of ways, they had to sort of show the federal government how to be better partners on this issue. So we think about the housing crisis, the collapse of the housing market and the foreclosure crisis that happened. The most intense foreclosure rates, the highest rates of foreclosure, were really focused in the south suburbs. It wasn't the city of Chicago, it was the southern suburbs. And that's a really fragmented jurisdictional map. It's not like here in Clark County. They have over 100 suburban jurisdictions outside of Chicago, just in Cook County alone. And what we saw is that a number of these jurisdictions, who are often quite small, they don't have the resources or capacity to really grapple with the scale of need that they're seeing. And they're often set up to compete against each other for really limited funds. When the federal government put neighborhood stabilization funds on the table following the recession, you saw 19 of these jurisdictions decide that instead of competing against each other, they were actually going to try and work together and come at this in a more regional, or in this case, sub-regional way. How are they going to work on housing blight issues and stemming the worst effects of the foreclosure crisis? When they applied for the federal funds, they were successful in getting those funds, but the dollars ended up being administered to 11 separate municipalities because they weren't used to having to work in that more regional way.
Right. So you mentioned the housing market. Obviously, Las Vegas suffered through a major housing market collapse. Because of that, where does Las Vegas land in the national ranking of poverty?
So that increase that I mentioned before, the 123%, that actually puts the Las Vegas region number 8 out of 100 metro areas for the rapid rise in suburban poverty.
James, what do you think about that? Hearing that Las Vegas is ranked 8th out of 100, does that surprise you, or?
Well, I think I think she can agree with you that we've come very far from where we were in 2008 and 2009, from the poverty rates, the foreclosure rates, the absolute hole this city was in. And ever since then, we've had many opportunities offered by the private sector and the city in rejuvenating the suburbia. Zappos has been a great facilitator of that. The downtown project on par with, or incited by Zappos. A lot of gentrification projects. Look at the district, Town Square, downtown Summerlin. Areas that have gone into focusing into the suburbia surrounding Las Vegas and looking at it from a commercial perspective. What new jobs can we offer? What confidence can we offer? What parks can we build? What schools can we work on? The suburbia was not only harmed with the foreclosure rates, but it was harmed with self-confidence. There was a lot that needed to be worked on, I think, from the culture emanating out of Henderson, North Las Vegas, the surrounding suburbia, and we have done a lot to work on that. We have come very far into the 8th place.
Okay. Now I'm going to go to kind of where we could try to resolve this issue. So, Daniel, I'm going to go ask you this question. So, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has been one of the advocates for the poor and lower income people. If he wins, do you think he'll be able to reduce the poverty level? I mean, he's been announcing, free college or raising the minimum wage to $15, et cetera. Do you think with him he'll be able to fix this crisis?
I think a lot of the times, and this reflects an issue that we have with American presidents, is we give them far too much credit and far too much blame. It's assuming that they have magical powers that they're able to just partake these massive actions. That fails to acknowledge that the government, that a lot of the money and a lot of the programs have to be originated in Congress, and they have to get through that. So unless Bernie's able to pull a magician's, just pull a little magician trick out of his hat and get both the Senate and Congress on his side, kind of like Barack Obama had in the first 2 years of his election, I don't think he's going to be able to do much to address his own sort of views into it. It's not saying he can't work with Republicans on certain ways to try to lower poverty, but with his specific sort of proposals, I don't think he's going to be able to get that accomplished.
What about you, David? What other, Bernie Sanders and other candidates, have you heard any other candidates speaking about, trying to help the poverty, poverty crisis and et cetera?
I can't recall in particular specific policies that other candidates have stated, except that Hillary Clinton has stated that she has wanted to help the poor. But something that Bernie Sanders might try to do is a negative income tax as more of a Nordic welfare model, as a way to help alleviate poverty, which I don't agree with, even though I think that he will. I think there's a lot of promise in earned income tax credits as a way to both incentivize labor and in order to get people out of poverty.
What about you, Elizabeth? Do you think that Sanders will be the solution, or any other candidate that you can see?
No, I really do think it all comes down to implementation, what can actually get passed. That was a very astute, very, very correct comment. Being able to build the coalition to move forward on policies that can make work pay. We've seen unemployment fall below 5%, but poverty is really stuck at post-recession levels. We haven't really seen it reach down the economic ladder. And it's not that people aren't working, it's that we have a lot more jobs that don't pay wages that will keep a family above the poverty line. So when we think about things like the earned income tax credit or minimum wage strategies, states and localities are experimenting with those as well, but that's a role that the federal government could really play a leadership role in, doing that at the scale, at the national scale, where it could be most effective and have the biggest impact. And it really comes to building those coalitions. The benefit of the EITC is this is one of the rare unicorns that exist in today's policy process, where both Speaker Ryan and a number of presidential candidates on the Republican side and Barack Obama and a lot of legislators and lawmakers on the left agree that there's room to expand and strengthen that credit to make it work better for low-income workers.
So in your research, because you kind of mentioned the states and stuff, in your research, which city do you think has given the charge in trying to fix this issue?
I think we've seen a lot of, and again, I wouldn't even put it down to one city, because I think some of the greatest innovations are these cross-jurisdictional partnerships, these more regional approaches. We've seen places like the Seattle metro area, especially in South King County, really take the lead and think collaboratively and innovatively on things like improving education outcomes for low-income students. The Chicago region I mentioned, those south suburbs have worked hard to bring the federal government along as partners so that they've actually been able to attract money to the sub-region and work on things like housing stability and affordable housing. We've seen Denver using transportation as a way to build out regional access to opportunity. So I think that there are models that are evolving tailored to the needs of these different places, but each that can share common sort of lessons learned, again, to help inform a more modernized approach to how we address poverty alleviation in places at the state and federal level.
Okay. Anyone want to take a last spiel at this? Yay, nay? No. All right. Well, we'll be right back, so don't go anywhere, and we'll see you shortly.
If you keep tanning, indoors or out, the effects of harmful rays will show up on your skin. Wrinkles, age spots, and an increased risk of skin cancer, including melanoma, the deadliest form of skin cancer, and the second most common cancer in women 15 to 29. Stop tanning. Time may not be on your side. Learn how to protect your skin at spotskincancer.org. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Lazy bones, loping through the day.
All over America, we're no longer just sedentary, we're stationary. And that's bad news for your bones, because bones need weight-bearing activity to grow strong and stay strong. So get up, get out, get moving. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
Never heard a word I say.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Thank you for coming back. After the San Bernardino attacks, the FBI has found evidence that Saeed Farouk and his wife Tashali Malik to have committed allegiance with ISIS, but the FBI is having trouble opening the couple's iPhone because of the passcode. The FBI, in a court order, has asked Apple to assist them in the investigation to create an app to decode the passcode just on the phone. Apple is reluctant to comply because they feel that this will be a Pandora's box, giving the government the ability to access the iPhone users' privacy info. What should happen, and should Apple even comply, or are they on their constitutional rights? So Daniel, let's start with you.
You know, I really enjoy Apple. I'm a firm fan of Apple products. I love them. Samsung's the enemy as far as I'm concerned. And I happen to
You
come
also
to
have Windows, but yeah.
Let's not talk about that. I come down heavily on Apple's side in this. One of my first issues with the government is the fact that the county themselves, whose iPhone we're trying to get into, failed to install their own technology that's supposed to remotely unlock this, because it wasn't a personal cell phone, it was a county phone. My second issue with the government is that they're claiming that this is going to be a one-time thing, ignoring the fact that there are 12 pending cases in the court system asking them to do the very same thing. So when their biggest argument is like, hey guys, it's okay, trust us, we're only going to use this once, when they're also asking for it in 12 other situations, really starts to strengthen Apple's side. I'm also a little bit disappointed that our government, with all the funding we have in it, still can't beat an iPhone's encryption. Makes me feel a little bit safer.
So then you do agree with Apple that this will be a Pandora's box?
I do believe with Apple, because what's been historic throughout our government, that when you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and all of our cell phones.
Okay. What about you, David?
Well, with respect to Daniel, I think some of his reasoning is a crock. With regard to the fact that there is a court order here, and if we actually do look at the Constitution, that we are allowed to be secure in our papers, but there's a warrant to open the phone because of a terrorist attack that killed over 20 people. All right, now the technology issue here is that there are only 10 attempts, I believe, before the phone completely locks itself.
Mandatory erasing of the data.
Before it mandatory erases the data. And it wasn't a county phone, it was the specific business phone of the business person that owned the phone, and they already gave permission to try and unlock it. And so what if there are 12 other cases? Some of these are murders that we're talking about. People were actually murdered. There are bodies in the street about this. And apparently, bodies in the street isn't good enough for some people to unlock a phone. Now, it isn't carte blanche for this government to go, oh, we're going to unlock every phone. But there's nothing wrong with a court, specifically a judge, saying, Apple, could you please unlock this phone? The federal government taking the phone and saying, hey, send it to Apple, and then giving it back to us when it's unlocked.
So before we dive in even more into this topic, let's go to our Out of the Office segment. We interviewed Associate Professor Stephen Bates. He's a professor here at the Journalism College. He has a law degree and is an expert in the First Amendment rights. So let's go see what he said.
They should have the right under the Fourth Amendment to decline to cooperate if they want to. They certainly could cooperate if they feel like it. The issue is that the FBI is asking them to develop a new operating system, not just asking them to give information they can readily get. That's a lot more complicated. That's more than just asking someone to put in a passcode or something. So, in my view, Apple should feel free to cooperate, but they shouldn't have to.
So Elizabeth, after listening to Professor Bates, what do you think?
Well, I think this is such a thorny issue, and we're really kind of, path breaking here. This is a totally new territory. So what I'm really curious to see is just how far up the chain this is going to go. I really don't think whatever's decided in this case, whatever side they come down on, this is not the end of it. This is too much of a pressing issue in how we decide to live our lives moving forward, what the government has the right to have access to or not. I feel like this is something that I would not be surprised to see working its way up to the Supreme Court eventually.
So James, listening to Daniel and David, who do you think is right? David, that, there was a murder that was caused here, that Apple should comply with the FBI, or with Daniel saying that no, Apple has its right to not comply, etc.?
I fall somewhere on neither.
Okay.
For me, this issue is a non-issue. So far, many technicians have come forward and offered to the FBI that they have the ability to crack the phone. The FBI has the ability to crack the phone now that these technicians have come forward, and Apple has declined the offer. And plus, they're citing an act back from 1789 when it was enacted, the Al Ritz Act. All Ritz
The
Act.
FBI.
There you go.
Citing the
So for me, this issue is not an issue of privacy. It's an issue of PR. If Apple allows their operating system to go back in their operating system and make this new operating software, they're going against everything they have said about their security and their privacy. This issue to me is not an issue of privacy. For me, it does not compute.
All right, well, let's go to our next topic. So last Saturday and Tuesday was the Nevada caucuses, with Hillary Clinton having a surprising victory and Donald Trump surprising everyone with a huge lead with him pulling up. So how was he able to do that? So James, how was Trump able to out-Trump us all?
I am the last person to ask because, and I will tell you why, I for months have been saying how this was not going to happen, that Trump was not going to be making it all the way to Super Tuesday. And I, honest to God, am flabbergasted. And I can only hope to God that when Super Tuesday comes along, that he is just blown out of the water by either Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, or that's it, not Ben Carson.
But you have Kasich.
Wait,
too.
he's still in?
Yeah, I know, right? Or Kasich. Kasich's a great guy. But for me, I am just absolutely blown out of the water that he's made it this far, and blown out of the water that so many Republicans at the Republican caucus have said that they don't want they want an anti-establishment candidate. This goes against everything I've known in political science.
Well, you have two anti-establishment candidates. You have Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, who,
I thought you were going to say Ben Carson.
No, well, Ben Carson, I guess Ben Carson, but
Yeah.
he's sleeping right now.
Okay, yes.
But, Ted Cruz, Mitch McConnell hates him, his party hates him, and
Right.
obviously the Democrats hate him because he's a Republican.
But his response back to that has been he has spoken for his constituency, and that's what he's been polling on. He's been saying that he has been working for the common man, not for the government, and that's been actually polling very well.
Are you sure Ted Cruz isn't telling a big lie? I mean, when you look at everything that the fellow candidates have got to stick on him, is his shady tactics.
When it comes to him, he's definitely someone that I can say I've trust Ted.
So Daniel, since you spoke up, I'm going to ask you: how was Hillary able to, back before the Saturday caucuses, polls were saying that Sanders was going to outbeat her, but then all of a sudden Hillary won by, I think it was like 4%. How was she able to do that? Did she have like an outside help by a mysterious person?
Oh, we're in Las Vegas. Let's not talk about outside help and mysterious people pulling strings.
Well,
when you look
inside person, should I say that outside?
When you look at what happened about, I believe it was 4 to 5 days after the caucus, she was officially endorsed by Harry Reid. And then you happen to look at the location.
Harry Reid actually endorsed her after the caucuses, but he.
And I was going to build on that because the biggest thing with that is between the Clinton machine and the Reid machine, and you look at the placement of some of the caucus sites. There were 6 caucus sites along the strips in various union hotels. Not only that, the union managers and the hotel managers were convinced to give up to 3 hours of paid leave for their workers to go caucus. Those are areas where Clinton won in 2008, even though the union endorsed Obama in 2008. It's where she had her base, and the location was put in several certain spots. It just seemed like the turnout and some of the areas where she was able to drive up the count were well fit for her.
So, David, what do you think? Because, obviously Harry Reid helped Hillary, with doing his phone calls with the unions to go out and vote. Do you think if it wasn't for Reid, Sanders might have won? And why is it that Trump won Nevada with 20% ahead?
When it comes to Sanders and Hillary, not necessarily. And the reason why is because I don't think Bernie Sanders figured he was going to be able to make it this far, and he did. Which part of that is an infrastructure issue, is that Hillary has set up in Nevada just months ago, before Bernie Sanders, I think, seriously thought that he would make it this far. So she already had a leg up on organization. She's already run for president before, so she has people and she has the organization to know how it's going to go. When it comes to Donald Trump, I went to Donald Trump's rally the night before the caucus. Donald Trump is a very good speaker. He's very good. The way he speaks is almost like a rhetorical yet a conversation, because you could feel like you're in the room with him, just one-on-one, and he's talking to you. And he's able to bring up issues that people are scared of, and he's able to address them and give them satisfactory answers.
All right. With that, I want to give Elizabeth the last word to say. So what's your opinion on the Nevada caucus results?
No, I mean, this has been just a fascinating time to be here in Las Vegas watching this all take place, especially given the sort of recent, I mean, this is still something the state is figuring out, right? So as an observer, it's just been a fascinating process throughout.
All right. Well, with that, that's all the time that we have. I just want to thank the panelists, and I would also like to give a special thanks to Elizabeth and Professor Bates. Follow us on Facebook at UNLV Scramble and on Twitter at UNLV The Scramble. Also, email us your opinions on unlvscramble@gmail.com. For further discussion, we want to hear from you, the audience, answer our weekly question. Was it a good move for Governor Sandoval to indicate that he is not interested in being a Supreme Court justice? Let us know. Thank you very much for seeing us. See you next week.